So now we're transitioning to the witchcraft craze. So we've kind of looked at the idea. We set up the creation. We've looked at the economic and population crisis that really created a sense of angst. So make sure you understand there's a lot of angst, there's frustration, and this is when we begin to see how it plays out in the localities. And the localities is, of course, it must be the witches. And the question here, why were the women such an easy target during the witchcraft craze? Well, as we look at this, there's a lot of words here. You need to make sure you're pausing and reading. First thing we see here is medieval theology. This is the Catholic theology that predated the Reformation. And all of the theologians, obviously men, they identified women were the creator of the original sin. The original sin, if you don't know about Eve, you don't necessarily have to know this, but what you need to know is women were blamed for the fall of the world. It was Eve who was the one who doomed women to be dominated by men. So this is going to be a highly developed Christian theology through the Catholic Church that said yes. And even when we look at the Protestant churches, they're not going to disagree with this because, again, we talk a little bit about the patriarchy. Clearly, the medieval theology helped support that. The medieval scientific thought really identified women as physically inferior. So they concluded scientifically, remember this is quotations, that they were susceptible to the sexual advances of Satan. Here we see the image here to the right where Satan is being given babies and probably going to be doing a whole bunch of other things that just kind of a weird concept, but they believe scientifically women were the inferior sex and therefore they were susceptible to the sexual advances. And I do want to point out the shift that the modern ideal of individualism, because now instead of community, society being the center of everything, individualism, it's me, I've earned my way. So therefore, these widows who have no ability to have work, well, they're also not going to get alms. Alms are Christian charity or religious charity in which the widows were able to access this stuff. But now all of that is gone. So with this idea, it becomes almost a survival of the fittest in that mentality. Older widows had to sell herbs as medicine to make money to survive. And in this element, they're going to be easily able to be identified as witches. Not shockingly, the stereotypical, the archetype of women who are going to be identified as witches are usually 40 or over. They're going to be single widows, and they're going to be identified as these witches as they had to sell holistic medicines to survive. And so they're easily going to be able to be marginalized and alienated. And then the good old misogyny. Misogyny is something, please don't randomly use in essays or short answers. You need to make sure you understand exactly what it means. Misogyny is the dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against women. And very important that you understand this element, this idea of misogyny. This is a concept in which creates which feminist historians talk about the patriarchy. I think we have enough evidence to the above this that really illustrates that women were marginalized, and there was this ingrained prejudice. Women could not be trusted, and the belief that women, this idea, from this misogyny, women would do whatever it took to get to power. They will have sex with Satan if that's what must happen. Again, this is just this idea, but I do want to point out this misogyny is this general paradigm in which identifies as the dislike, contempt, or ingrained prejudice against women. It is the idea that women are naturally inferior, so therefore we need to make sure that they know their lane. And I think, again, I know that there's arguments in today's world that misogyny is a social construct that doesn't make sense. But I will tell you, during this time period, women were marginalized and alienated because of it. And I love what your textbook does here, right? It gives us two key pieces of evidence. So this is a witchcraft judge. So Nicholas Ramey most likely is this heavily educated man. He knows his Bible. He knows his theology. He probably knew law. But look at this misogyny here. It would not be unreasonable that the scum of humanity should be drawn chiefly from the feminine sex. That's straight from your textbook. I hope if you've been power mapping, this would be something I hope it'd be in your power map. It's the evidence, those details. And here we see from the first hand, clearly they already are predisposed to think women were the evil ones. And then Dr. Spavogo gives a different judge, doesn't give him by name, but look at this. The devil uses them. So because he knows that women love carnal pleasures, and he means to bind them to his allegiance by such agreeable provocations. And this is all tied up to quote unquote that women quote unquote had orgies with Satan. Really weird stuff as you're power mapping this. I hope you kind of pause and say, what in the heck is going on there? But regardless of this was during this whole time period. All of this is the angst. And I think this painting behind really gives you this feeling of the angst that people were looking to blame someone. Thankfully, the mania does come wind down during the last half of the 17th century into the 18th century. And why did this? Because again, we're talking about a 50-year period in which about 100,000 people were executed, maybe a little bit. That's a highly rated, but again, we have several dozens of tens of thousands of people who are executed and tried. So why does this do the end? Well, it's the end of the political and religious chaos of the 30 Years' War and this thing called the English Civil War. All of this, by the time we get to 1650, almost all of the chaos is over with, and people are like, hey, we're able to move off. Additionally, the little ice age had come to an end as well, and they were recovering. Additionally, the last thing we see here is the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution began in the mid part of the 17th century. We're going to study this in the next unit. It becomes this idea of this new advanced modern, and they're really going to say, hey, we're sophisticated. It brought in an age of reason, and it's gonna leave this mythology and superstition of witchcraft craze behind. So we really begin to see that. And in general, Europeans wanted the panic to end. They were tired. Who was next? Who was going to be accused of witchcraft next? And that created a sense of element. So really, the last of the witchcraft trials really don't end until the mid 18th century, but the overall peak of it winds down, and it really kind of helps us understand as we transition into the 30 Years' War and these different elements. There is a ton of chaos that's going to be brought to an end. I hope this makes sense to you guys. You guys have a great day.